I think y'all know who I am, but my name is Sage. I am the host here at Comfort Zone Yoga, which is my virtual studio focused on teacher development. And what we're going to do in this next 53 minutes or so is talk about classroom management and handling the unexpected. One of my favorite quotes that I always deliver in yoga teacher training comes from then General Eisenhower. When going into battle, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. Because having thought through how you might handle some of these weirdnesses that students could present in your class gives you a real leg up so that you can keep your cool and collected equanimity when your students need to be brought back in line in some way. I'd also love for us to consider when we should just let things go, because if you spend any time at the front of the classroom, I think you can already tell that your experience looking out on the students is very different from the students' experience on the mat, kind of looking inward into their own practice. And as holders of the space, we can be hypersensitive to things that the students literally do not even notice, like distracting sounds from outside the room or students who are doing different things. I think when we are practicing, we kind of have these wonderful metaphorical blinders on and we don't really notice what's going on in the room around us. Whereas when we're at the front of the room, it can be really, could feel like a really weighty responsibility to try to hold the space for everybody. And while that is a wonderful impulse, at its worst, it can tip into micromanagement. I was talking a little earlier today with a student, and I said, I remember once I had this lady who was just messing with her pager the whole start of class while I was like delivering my weighty, important lesson. I like my well thought out theme, explication Dharma talk. And I was wondering, can't she just leave her pager alone? And only after a little while did I realize that's not a pager. That's her insulin pump. And then I realized, oh, maybe I should just not worry about what students are doing. If it isn't distracting the rest of the room, it's really not my business. So this is something that we will think through collectively as a group today. And if you're just now rolling in, come through the chat. You can hit the C button, tell us who you are, where you're from, and if you like, what kind of classes you teach and to whom. So I'm going to get us into our mini lesson. And it's going to take us back through this kind of mindset shift that I think really changes everything for you as a yoga teacher. And it's to see our role as teachers really clearly. Like I was just talking about, as the host of the classroom, we can experience potential disruptions in class in a way that's really different from what our students feel. And we always need to keep this mindset front and center. We are not the hero of our yoga class. It's not our class, it's the class, as somebody said to me on Threads this week, which I really, really liked. It's not my class, it's the class. And the students are the heroes. They're the ones with the main character energy coming in. They're the ones having the most important experience in class. And we're just kind of the stage manager off in the wings, here to help keep them on track, to offer them their lines if they forget their line, and to gently guide them through the practice at a pacing that we guess will make sense for them. But your students, as the heroes, have that main character agency. And they're the ones who ultimately make the decisions for themselves about what they put on their plate off the buffet of options that you give them in class and what they don't. So there are plenty of examples, and we'll talk about some of them in this hour, where we should just not worry about students making decisions that are different than what we're suggesting or different from what we would make in our own practice. There are, of course, exceptions to that, where students are doing things that could be injurious to other people in the room or offensive to other people in the room or simply distracting to other people in the room that kind of transgress social boundaries or the studio etiquette. And those are the circumstances where we need to have a conversation with that student, either if it's something really pressing in the moment, but more likely after class, where we need to manage the student's experience and their expectations a little bit more. So as the guide of the yoga classroom, we're creating a container for the students' experiences. We're not trying to make it happen for them. Like, they are the actors. We're not reading the lines from us, the wings of the stage, as the stage manager. We're there to facilitate their sense of yoga and union and connection, and not to micromanage them. It's also important to remember that we are there to serve the entire room, not simply the most challenging student. And this plays out in two ways. One is to not confront the most challenging student when they are negatively affecting the impact of the whole room. That would be a mistake. But the other is to let that one student who is drawing all your attention make you forget that it's really about the collective in the room. And it's not about pleasing that one student or even bringing that one student in line during the course of the class. And when we take these disruptors purposefully, personally, then we are falling into this kind of trap of our own teacher's ego and making it about us and not about our students. So again, this shift back to remembering that we're the guide and the students are the heroes is going to be your very best friend when you are confronted with challenging student behavior in class. So how do we stay in guide mode even when we do feel challenged? Well, good thing we do yoga, because your practice will be your presence. Your practice will be your anchor. You breathe, you react, not respond. You remember your purpose as a guide and not as the main character of your class. And you focus on the safety of the entire room, on your collective, not just on that one distracting student. Let's discern between a disruptive student and disruptive behavior, because often the students may not even realize that what they're doing goes against some etiquette that may have been unspoken to them. So much of what we do in creating a good container as hosts in the yoga studio, as hosts in a yoga class that we're teaching, even if it's something that we've created out in a park, is to set expectations about what's going to go on and about what students are free to do and discouraged not to do in the context of a class. So if you have like a strict no cell phones policy, you need to make that really clear ahead of time. Otherwise, kind of stacking the deck for yourself to get frustrated and maybe a little bit up in your feelings about what's happening if somebody does walk into class with a cell phone. So communication ahead of the fact can be really, really useful. Often students just don't know what's going on, or they come to yoga because they are in some kind of need for yoga, a personal crisis of some kind, discomfort or an injury of some kind. All of this is an impetus for people to come to the mat. So I'm not saying that students come to the mat because they're broken and we need to fix them. But I am saying that people come to yoga when they need it, and that need might sometimes be at the root of some of these behaviors we could describe as challenging in our yoga class. So compassion is really, really helpful. And trying to posit alternative situations, because as we know from our yoga study, the root of all of our suffering, and the root of our suffering as teachers, the root of my suffering, thinking that my student was playing with her pager and not just adjusting her insulin pump, was wrong seeing. I thought I knew what was going on, and I didn't. I didn't have the full picture. And the practice itself can start to give us a clear sense of things as they are, and a deeper understanding that often the initial read that we get on a situation is not the actual situation itself. Some students you'll think that they're acting up in class, but it's just that they don't understand the cues that you've given, or it doesn't feel good to them. So they have to not follow your instructions because the pose as you have cued it has been unsatisfactory to their experience. It didn't feel good in their body. Next month's free call is about teaching multi-level classes. So this is something that we can put a pin in and come back to next month when we talk about ways to include almost everyone in class. There are, though, some students who just need some validation or some attention, and those are the ones that we need to tread lightly with to give them just enough attention and validation that they feel seen, and not so much that they start to hog your attention and your validation and disrupt the class and take it off the rails. So recognizing your own patterns of people pleasing can be really helpful here. Knowing when you tend to get into that people pleasing mode, and remembering that you are there to protect the energy of the group and the experience of the collective. Sometimes people are just a little bit clueless and unaware of how their behavior affects others. And if you can have a kind word for them, ask them to collaborate with you on finding a solution to the disruptive behavior, they may be horrified because they may literally not have even known that what they were doing was disruptive to the room. And that's why we've got to lead with compassion and equanimity when we are faced with these challenging circumstances. So, our internal practice is to manage our own reaction. I like to use like a three-part mantra here. I already said I respond rather than react. I set boundaries with compassion. Sometimes I've heard this described as clarity is kindness, clear is kind. I think it can be just straight up true when you're setting expectations for behavior in the yoga classroom. And I serve all my students through my equanimity. Because not only are you being kind to the potential disruptor, disruptive behavior, you're also being kind to all the other students in the room when you can maintain the highest possible standard for behavior in the room and model it by addressing any issues with as much compassion as you can muster. Y'all, I don't think that we are out here really losing our cool, that externally at least with our yoga students. But I know when you start to think like, what would I do if, and what's going to happen when you get these ideas? I know I have horrible nightmares. I once dreamt that I've literally manually strangled one of my yoga students because he wasn't doing what I said. Now I work with football players, so you could see why. Like I would sometimes be like, I'm going to need to use physical force to keep them in line. They're actually very, very kind and very, very good at following directions. But it can be tough, you know? We start to imagine these crazy situations where people are like, "You can't tell me what to do." That's not going to happen in your yoga classroom. But sometimes when we start to think things through, we think of like, "Oh, we're gonna lose it, we're gonna yell at them." I certainly have dreams all the time where I yell at my yoga students. I was on an accountability group call earlier, and one of the women in there is a grief coach. And she said, I was just reading about anxiety. I was telling her I was going to give you all this call. And she said, I was just reading about anxiety, that anxiety tricks us into thinking that things are going to be worse than they are, and we're not going to be able to handle them as well as we can. And that's like, yeah, that's exactly right. So when we start to think through, like, how am I going to handle these disruptive behaviors in class? It's never going to be as bad as you imagine. And you're always going to be better at handling it than you think. As a studio owner, I would want to remind you, you are never alone. Even if you're teaching a solo class that you have set up in your studio out back in your yard or out in the park, and you feel like you're all alone in leading that class, you still have a yoga teacher trainer. You've got me, you've got the other folks at Comfort Zone Yoga. So if you find yourself faced with a situation that you aren't sure how to handle, or you want a sounding board on how to handle this in so that you can approach it with equanimity, reach out to me. I'm here to help. Ask your teacher trainer. They are there to help. Ask your studio owner or your manager. And if something feels especially sensitive, it can be useful to have a witness in the room if you have to have a difficult conversation. So that's where having your manager or the studio owner would be really useful in the room. So if there's something that you do need to address, it's useful to pause, take a breath, and breathe before you respond. Remember, we try to respond rather than react. And then to use neutral observation-based language. Like, I've noticed the smell of smoke when you arrive at the studio. It seems to me like you might live in a house with a smoker. See how that's like, not like, you shouldn't smoke on the way into class, or don't smoke in your car on the way into class. Because if we're trying to be compassionate and envision some alternate scenarios, what if this is a student who's caring for her grandfather, living in the house with her grandfather, and her grandfather is the smoker? No, it's tough to get the smoke smell out of clothes. Could we brainstorm together some ways that we could keep a fresh pair of clothes for you in your trunk or at the studio, so that when you arrive, we're not bringing in that smell of smoke, because we try to be as scent neutral as possible in the studio. Inviting students to collaborate with you on a correction to the behavior, on some way to avoid the behavior in the future, can be really, really useful. But prevention is our best defense here. So thinking ahead of time how we can set clear expectations at the beginning of class or even before class begins, by having signage at the studio, in your space as people come in, by making a really quick like 5 do's and don'ts for yoga class that people see on your website, or that goes into an email receipt when they sign up for your class. All of these are ways to set expectations around behavior so that everybody has a better experience. Also useful to have systems in place for common issues, like people who are consistently arriving late. We should have a space set up for them by the door, or make it really clear the door gets locked 5 minutes after class start time. Because when you prove that that is true, They're not going to keep coming late. Either they're going to stop coming entirely, which problem solved, or they're going to suddenly be able to make it before that 5-minute hard close at the end of class. If people need to leave early, then you say at the beginning of class, if you've got to leave early, leave your mat. I'm happy to put it away. Leave as quietly as you can at the beginning of Shavasana, whatever it is you need to say. Building a relationship with regulars can be really useful so that you've got allies in the classroom who model good behavior. That can be really, really useful. And then having a classroom setup that minimizes the disruption of latecomers. So one of the many silver linings of the COVID pandemic at my studio was we switched to complete pre-registration. Everybody has to sign up before class, and the sign up closes an hour before class begins. So we always know the max number of students who are going to be in the room, which means that I can set up the room for 18 or 21 or 12, or if there's 5, I know I can do that. It lets me make rooms where we're not always, oh, could you move your mat over? Could you move your mat over? And for people who do encounter traffic on the way in and have to squeeze in, there's a space already set up for them. It's such a plus from this weird last 5 years that we've had, and learning to deal with this kind of new normal. So I really recommend that if you get the chance to do pre-registration, or even just to set up a few extra stations over by the door for latecomers, that can go a huge way into minimizing distractions in the classroom. It's also just a nice feeling for your students that you put some thought into them being there, that you've thought through how they're going to need these props, that you maybe found some challenging ways to use the props so they don't feel like crutches. Just a win all around. So paradoxically, your most challenging moments in the yoga classroom, where you do need to talk to the smelly student, or have a word with someone who was taking selfies in class or whatever, these moments can fast track your teaching. They will make you the best version of your teaching self. It's kind of trial by fire, forged in fire here. But these are opportunities for you to put your practice into action, to keep coming back to center, to be a good model for your students, and to center your students above yourself, to make sure that the collective experience of the room is always front and center, and you're not trying to think of yourself as the hero. Because your students are going to remember how you made them feel way more than they're going to remember any sequence you taught or any super cool transition. What questions does that little mini lesson bring up for y'all? Feel free to come off mute and ask a question, or if you're not in a place where you can unmute, you could pop it in the chat.
I think sometimes, this is more of just an observation than a question, Sage. And I'm Amy, by the way. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
I think sometimes I've noticed when I've had a really difficult student, that my students are aware of it. I know we talk about how they're not aware of it, but this particular student was disruptive. And so then they're looking at the student, they're looking at me, they're looking at the student, they're looking at me, and they're like, are you gonna act and try to act with equanimity? Sometimes it's challenging when they're really being a stinker and they're distracting the whole room. But I do find that if I can react with equanimity, I'm thinking of we all have one particular student or one experience we've had. Then after class, my students were all coming up to me after class and being like, oh my gosh, you handled that so well. You did that so much better than I would have. I wanted to, smack her, which is terrible. And these were really nice people. But I agree that you set the tone, and then you're demonstrating, oh, yoga is way more than just the asanas. It's the philosophy, it's the equanimity, it's the giving people the benefit of the doubt. And it's a great tool. But if I hadn't acted, I think one of my students would have, and then that would have been bad.
Yeah.
And it could have turned into something much more, because they weren't necessarily, they would have been more reactive than that. So that's all I wanted to say. It was a person who specifically just kept criticizing things, like saying, that's not a sun salutation. Yes, or that's not sun B. And I kept saying, well, there are different modifications and variations. Well, that's not it. And then, everyone in my class, I could just see one by one, they were just like, shut up.
Oh, yeah. And that's where our anxiety is like, fine, you teach the class.
Yeah, I know.
Get imagine.
Yeah, but I did actually have an opportunity to talk to that person. And not, she boogied out after class, but I did have an opportunity. She did come back, and I did have an opportunity to talk to her and say, "It's so interesting that there are so many varieties and of this and that." Well, she ended up being actually one of my best and most regular students in the end. So somehow we got through it. But boy, she was a stinker. She was a stinker, and I think she just needed attention and wanted someone to pay attention to her. So it worked. It worked. But
Fine line to walk there. And it sounds like you walked it really well.
well, yeah, I don't know. I tried my best.
You have to give them a little bit of that attention and validation that they want, but just the tiniest soupçon, not
Yeah,
too much, or they're gonna take everything that you have to give.
absolutely. Un petit peu.
Mhm. Anybody else have a question or observation before we look at some potential scenarios and discuss what we would do? All right. This is a cool feature on this app, which is called Better, by the way, as you saw when you came in. I've got some flashcards for us. What would you do if? And feel free to pop answers to this in the chat or hit the M button, unmute yourself, click the microphone button, and tell me what would you do if a student doesn't follow your sequence and instead rests? And while you think about this and locate the unmute button, I will say in the last year, it took 20 years of teaching, but in the last year, I taught a yin class, a 60-minute yin class. The first shape was a supported fish pose, the one with the bolster ramp and the block underneath the upper end of the bolster. I had a student come into that shape and never leave it. 60 minutes in that shape. And I was very proud of her. I did confirm that she was breathing because I was a little concerned, like, what's going on here? But she kept breathing and she just stayed in that the whole class. And I'd heard that that could happen, but I had not witnessed it personally myself until that time. It's pretty amazing. So what would you do if a student took rest? Go ahead, Alyssa.
Yeah, I had that happen recently. It was a student who has been coming to my class for a very long time. She has some physical issues. She does modify. And she's often told me after class, her hip hurts. And I know she's in physical therapy. I know her. She's a lovely person. And during one class, I saw her go down into child's pose and stay there for a long time. So I put everybody in child's pose. And then I quietly went over to her on her mat and very softly said to her, "Kathy, are you doing okay?" And I just wanted to check. And she said, "Yes, I'm fine. I'm just taking child's pose." And I said, "Good for you. That's exactly what you need to be doing. Feel free to take it for the whole class if you like." Then I went back and continued teaching. It came from my concern because I knew her well, and then I checked with her after. But one of the things that I say at the beginning of my class, and teachers will often say, take whatever version of this pose that you want to as you go along. Feel free to stay in child's pose if you like, but very few people do that, actually. So when somebody does, I feel the need. I mean, if it's somebody that I know doesn't have any physical issues or whatever, I may or may not check in. But her in particular, I did. And she actually thanked me at the end of class for my concern because I saw her. And I think other people felt reassured because they saw me see her.
Yeah. Yep. Beautifully handled. I think that's really smart. Yeah. I wouldn't check on everybody who drops into child's pose, but it's somebody who's been there a while. Absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah. So that worked
Bravo.
out well.
Good. Well done.
Thank you.
Let me pause it.
I would
Oh, go ahead, Brigitte.
so I would just figure that they weren't feeling well, and I would just not check, but as if I do know them, ask if everything is okay. If it is,
Yeah. That's exactly what to do. And even just a little like, you good? You good? Like kind of thumbs up gesture can be really useful.
Hmm.
Awesome. So here's the flip side of this flashcard. What if the student is doing the exact opposite? So they're not following your sequence, but they're kicking up into
I
handstands
was
instead.
doing okay.
Oh,
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 I
you
had
dropped out for a second, but
more.
I moved on. And now we're looking at a new flashcard. I've had this happen. Have y'all had this happen? People going like, not just like, oh, I think I'll skip that pose, but and not just like, oh, let me do a little subtle bind here in this shape. Like, let me start to kick up into handstand before class even begins or at other inappropriate moments. What would you do?
I had a woman do this in a chair yoga class.
wow.
Okay. I had just started teaching, and this woman, everybody's on chairs, and we were doing some stretching, and we were sitting and standing and whatever. It was chair plus standing sequence or whatever. And this woman, who seemed to be very capable, there was a broad range in this class. And near the end of the class, she went up into a headstand, and I nearly fell over. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know what to do. And I don't think, and I just went over to her. She seemed to know what she was doing. Okay. I thought if she could get up there, she must be okay. But I don't even teach in my classes headstand. And then at the end, she came down and I said, oh, is that usually in your practice? And she said, I've been practicing yoga for 20 years. Yes, I always do a headstand. And I said, well, as long as you do it safely and you know what you're doing, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if I think
And
but
I had to like really,
yeah,
yeah. So what, did I do the right thing? I don't.
I think so. I think so. I think I would allow that because if it's controlled, if she's not kicking and flailing around, if it makes her happy and it's not disrupting the vibe in the classroom and it is at the like classically headstand portion of the practice, fine.
Yeah. And then she used to come to my class and everybody else was on chair and whatever. And she would do like a full on sun salutation because I would do a seated sun salutation. But I was okay with that. I thought that that was actually beautiful that she was following her own practice and it wasn't disruptive, So,
Yeah. Sounds like you did it just right.
I've asked students before who've been in the front doing stuff like that if they would mind going to the back of the room. Like, can we put your mat in the back because you're of it, I always love it when people spice things up and and I really do. I always tell people to add more, but when you're right in the middle at the front, it kind of is distracting for the other people around. So I have suggested, hey, you know, especially with the handstands, you could use the wall and everything. And plus, I do worry sometimes when one person's flailing about and you've got a crowded class and people are doing other things and are coming in different directions as people are kicking up, that it could be dangerous. So I have asked one particular student if she would be okay moving to the back. And she was fine moving, but then she came back to her front spot in other classes and didn't do that anymore. And I wasn't trying to shame her, but I just felt like it was sort of a safety issue for the people that were next to her.
Yeah. I don't think it's a coincidence that the people who do the performative poses sit up front and center.
Yeah, exactly.
And even asking them, could you move to the back for that? Because I don't want other people to feel obligated to follow your beautiful practice.
Yes.
There are ways that you can kind of stroke their ego, but like that's saying like, I see you, practice
I'm
number
amazing.
You're amazing. Amazing. We don't want to make the other students feel bad that they can't do what you can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is like a non-sassy way to deliver the same message. Like, that's incredible. I love that you feel free to express your practice in my class. Fantastic. I also worry that other people are going to try that and they were not going to have the control that you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. All right, here's another flashcard. Student smells fine when they get there. But over the course of the class, particularly a movement-based class, a sweaty class, they don't smell so fresh. What would you do?
Tough one.
Mhm. Lorna, you've seen that maybe or smelled it?
It happened, but not with a student. Sadly, it was a teacher.
Yeah.
I took a class recently, not long ago, a little workshop, and I wasn't sure at the beginning if it was the teacher. Like, are you serious? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was
This
disappointing, honestly.
yeah, this is a very layered issue because there can be cultural differences and medical reasons
Mm.
for people to smell particular ways. And I have encountered this many times over 15 years of studio ownership. Um, eh, this is why I phrase this way. If they showed up smelling fine, then I think we just have to accept it. Now, feel free to push back on here, and if you have a delicate way to do this, I'd love to hear it. But if somebody has made an effort to arrive smelling neutral, I think that if we can't blame somebody for sweating in a spicy practice or a room that's been heated. But yeah, it can be, and maybe you're the only one who notices, or it may be that everyone notices. It's a tough one. We had a student who would arrive smelling fine, but who had like some mildew smell in their clothes. And that was a really delicate one. And I had to work. This is before the days of Chat GPT, but let me tell y'all, this is a great use of Chat GPT. I am 100% serious to say like, how could I handle this in either a face-to-face conversation or an email to somebody that I need to bring this up with, because other students are commenting on it. And that was the situation. In this case, other students were like, that's pretty stinky. They showed up smelling pretty fresh. Ultimately, my suggestion was to try this great brand of detergent that I used when I used to run marathons, and my sports bras were stanky. And it really would get that mildew smell out of it. It was met with a little bit of resistance and then a little bit of I'll try it. And then ultimately, we lost that student. But working back from the intended outcome, which was to protect the experience of the whole group, I don't think I would have done anything differently. A sub question here is if you have to have a conversation with somebody here's the next card, smelling strongly on arrival, is that something that is best done face to face or that is best done over email or on the phone? What do y'all think about that?
Hmm.
I think it's tough because sometimes email, can be comfortable for the student and also for the person giving the information because, they don't have to face it. But also I think personally, I would probably try to do it face to face only because I feel like the student would see my face and read that I'm actually very empathic about it and that I'm like, yeah, I don't know how to say this. And I don't know. I feel like if someone was going to talk to me about it, I would almost rather have them say it face to face, especially if it was a person who was coming with compassion. And I would be very compassionate expressing that. I wouldn't be like, hey, you stink. I'd say, hey, this is so hard for me to tell you, but I've had a few people, I've noticed this and gosh, it happens to me too. And blah, blah, blah. So I think that would probably go that way, even though I think it would be, much easier to draft an email. So that's just me. But I think, I don't know I would love to hear what other people have to say.
Me too. Somebody else tell me, what would you do?
Hi, this is Carissa. So I think it's the first time I've said anything, but hi. I agree entirely. Just coming from the background, I've not really taught any classes, so I have no experience whatsoever. But I think being able to say face to face something, I totally agree. There's an empathy. There's, the ability to say face to face, this is a tough conversation, and they know that it is. And at least you can address it right then and there too. Especially if you have a little boutique in your store, maybe you can help them that way too, I guess.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, as Amy pointed out, our tendency is to want the easy route where we can just write it, we don't have to be there. And applying the golden rule, I would personally like to have it in an email because I need to process. And it's going to take me a couple hours to process. So for me, email would, if you got to tell me something, tell me in an email. Let me process it in my own time. But I 100% agree with both of you. Like, as difficult as it can be to have this in-person conversation, you can really wrap it with some sweetness in ways that are really useful. And you can also kind of send out first like a light shot across the bow to see what the reaction is going to be and determine how far do we need to take it. You could always follow up with an email, especially if it's like, oh, I did some research and I found this great detergent. Then that's a way to loop back to the conversation. Here's some deodorant that seems to work and it's all natural. There's a way to come back to the conversation. You may know I own a day spa as well as a yoga studio. And I was just having a facial a couple weeks ago and with one of our estheticians who is also a cook, like she had worked in a restaurant. So I knew she loved to cook, but I could certainly smell the garlic on her hands at the very beginning before the scent of the product overtook it. And of course, I'm her boss, so I have to tell her, right? But I still had to steel myself up to be like, gotta say it, gotta say it. It's like, oh, speaking of smells, I could smell garlic at the beginning before the product's like, I know you love to cook. And she's like, oh yeah, I just like found this Peruvian chicken recipe and I had just like been marinating a chicken right before I came and that was her first appointment of the day. I was like, there you go. So then that became a whole conversation that I had with our lead therapist. What can we get for the therapist in the staff room to wash their hands with? That was another way to use Chat GPT is after I already had this in-person conversation, I was like, hey, Chat, how do people get garlic smell out of their fingers? And I found some really good answers. Oh, it was yeah, another good use case. But I was really glad that I steeled myself to like, yes, stainless steel, exactly. I was really glad that I steeled myself to have that as an in-person conversation because it let me kind of finesse it a little bit on the other end. And then like, oh, tell me more about this chicken recipe. And it wound up, I think, being more of a compliment feedback sandwich in a way that was as compassionate as I could make it. That's a tough one. Let's see. I've already kind of alluded to this one, but what would you do if a student had their electric device in class? It could be an insulin monitor, and those sometimes go off and beep. It could be a pager. Not that people really use that much anymore, but back in the day they used to, and they would be on call, or it could be their telephone. What do y'all do then?
I think if it's okay, I'll try again at this one, but I would say first again. I would say that generally no phones are permitted in the classroom unless you're expecting an emergency or to keep it on, or maybe no phones, but you keep it on silent. I think that's what I've heard it's not something we really talked about much in teacher training, so I'm not exactly sure how to handle that, but I guess if I was going off of what I feel, I would say at least keep it on silent if you can, or vibrate only.
Yep.
I'd love to hear feedback on that thought.
Yeah, I think it's great. And Amy put in the chat, I think it goes back to setting the rules ahead of time. If it's a no cell phone space, then we could even approach that student if they had their phone. They just live in our hands, right? We may not even know that we're walking in with it and setting it down. And especially if you see the student puts it face down, it's like, oh, they just realized whatever they didn't want to leave it in the lobby. It's their brand new phone. They spent $1,600 on it. They don't want somebody to swipe it from the lobby. Valid, fine. But yes, let's make sure it's on silent. Way back in the day, way before the regular online yoga, I used to record my classes for streaming, and they were recorded like on a video camera on an SD card. And all the students in the room knew that this was happening. It was really well communicated beforehand. But I had a wireless microphone that was really sensitive and it would get interference if people's phones were on. So I had to have everybody like put their phone in airplane mode or off. And I did have a student come, and I'm pretty sure he was on call. And I was like, leave it at the desk. We had a fully staffed desk then. And he was not happy about it, which I kind of understand now. And that's something that I always felt a little bit bad about. Like, kind of like if you're on call, I would rather have you do 50 minutes of yoga and then have to go to deliver a baby or whatever than to not get your yoga in. So I think on call is a reason to have it. Sometimes it's like, I got a first time babysitter. Like, yes, and you chose to spend your first time ever with a babysitter taking care of your child at yoga. Please come and bring your phone if it's going to make this a more relaxing experience for you. So I can think of a lot of valid times when the phone could be in the room, but yes, I absolutely agree. It should be on silent or, on vibrate, and you're set up near the door so that if it goes off, you're immediately out in the hallway to answer it. And it just sits there. It doesn't get touched during class because what if we flip this card and it's that a student uses their device in class silently? What if they're using it silently? What if they're just thumbs upping a text? Or what if they're taking a selfie before class with nobody else in it? Hmm. Amy, I see you talking, but I think you were muted.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? No? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I think I'd probably let it slide. Selfie before class, especially if it's a young person, because I'm glad that the young people are in my class. And especially, where I've been teaching was a college town, and I'm very happy to have young people in my class. And if they take a selfie ahead of time, and that doesn't bother me. If they're taking a selfie in class, I'd probably say something. I also used to be a high school English teacher a long time ago, so I might put on my teacher voice. But and then the silently stuff during class, probably would let that slide during class, but I might say something to them after class, like, hey, and go back to the rule. We kind of have a rule about, unless it's an emergency, having your phone in class, and you weren't distracting or anything, but, maybe, I don't know, I might say something. It just depends on the relationship with the student, with the class, with the whole place I'm teaching at too, because is it my studio? Am I, teaching at somebody else's studio who had different rules? I have to follow the rules of the studio too. So,
Yep. The circumstance is so different. Again, like me teaching the football team, gentlemen, headphones off, phones off. They respond really well, especially when the big strength and conditioning coach is the one saying it. But like, yeah, once you've established that, I have a whole list of like future podcast episodes. And one of them, this is the only thing it says so far on my notes to self. It says middle school gym teacher energy. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of what you need to bring to your classroom with particular student population is that middle school gym teacher energy. It's just like, nope, this is how things are going to be. Brr. And then there are other circumstances like, maybe at the senior center or like the gentle yoga class at the studio where you would never bring that energy. So it's all a question of circumstance. Let's take this card one level higher. What would you do if a student used their device in class by answering a call or by taking a photo that included other people? Yeah, like the line has to go somewhere, right?
Yeah, that's not good.
No, it's not good. So
Not permissible, but you
right,
have to find
exactly.
a nice way to say it.
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah,
had
but
a
that's
student the other day in the middle of the class, her phone went off and it was the sound of breaking glass. I kid you not. And I was so taken aback, and she was right up front. And I said, wow, what is that? She promptly, thankfully got up, walked out, which I was really glad that she did. And I thought I'm going to have to deal with this at the end. And then at the end of class, she came back in and she continued with class. And at the end, she said, "I am so sorry about that. I thought it was on mute and it wasn't. And my husband was calling and I'm like, what was that sound?" And she said it was breaking glass. And then said, "Why?" She said, "Well, my husband has a company where he installs glass. So that it was his company." And I was like, "Okay, from going forward, can you please make sure that it is silence?" And I wanted to give her some grace because it was a one time only
Yeah.
kind of thing. But I was also so happy that she removed herself and I didn't have to remove her, but took a beat, took a few breaths and just continued teaching the class because I didn't want the class to see that I was annoyed, disturbed, irritated, like practicing my yoga.
Exactly. Back to
So
equanimity. Yep. Well, she
that's
probably
the
will put that with again. It's a reminder to you to say, everybody got your phones on mute for real? Are you sure?
Well, right. That's right. But sometimes I forget at the beginning of class to say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Well, we're
mean
all
to say it, but
and it is
I
good
get into
yoga.
the theme and I started
Yeah.
trying to make it a practice at the beginning.
Uh-huh.
Because I think when you set that ground rule, then if somebody steps over that line, it's easier to come back to it, like people have said again and
Yep.
again.
Yep. Lorna said in the chat she sees more teachers than students making videos. And I laughed at that, but yeah, that may be true. On some level, you need some video for publicity, but your video should never include your students in Shavasana. My God, I hate seeing pictures of people in Shavasana, and you're like, that they did not ask permission for that. No, that's what photo shoots are for. Do it in a photo shoot, and then it'll look way better too. Don't do it during your class. Do not touch your phone during your class unless you're using it to turn the volume down on your music or whatever. You do not touch your phone in class. You do not take pictures of your students without their express permission in writing. You want to make sure you lock that down in writing. That said, I'm a big fan of videoing your class when it's just you on camera and you can tell your students, I am doing this so that I can review myself so I can be the best teacher possible for you. But you don't put your students in there without them absolutely giving you complete written permission for it. Whew, I got on a soapbox. Wow. All right. So I'm going to jump us ahead to this last segment of my agenda, which is starting to wrap us up. Let's see if I can close. How do I close the flashcards? I think here we go, close them. Couple of things to point out to y'all. I don't know that you can see the agenda items, but there are some links in there if you can. One is that I have a mentorship membership where we have conversations like this every month. It's part of our teachers lounge. We also have a free tasting space in Comfort Zone where you can look around in the mentorship program. Come find me on socials. Get involved at Comfort Zone because there's a retreat waiting for you when you achieve a few little hurdles. I think Carissa's got it. Amy will get it if she hasn't already. A little 2 days to transformation retreat. And I would love to know from you here in this poll what topics you'd like to see on future conversations. Because I've got a couple booked on through August. The next open call is called From Sutras to Self. Carissa, I'll know you're going to be there. It is a 2 CEU course on yoga philosophy. My co-writer of Teaching Yoga Beyond the Poses, Alexandra Desiato, and her secret sister, Maria Luther Phelps, that she did not know she had, that their father did not know he had until they were in their 40s. Like Alexandra and her sister are teaching this class. I know it's quite a story. And so hopefully you'll get to hear that story from them. And I know it's just amazing. And they're wonderful teachers and just so sweet to have together, this kind of sisterly energy, even though they were secret sisters. They are leading this for 2 hours on a Wednesday in June. I think it's June 7th. And then it is a feeder for a 4-week series that they're doing. That's a 20 CEU series on sutra study, like Bible study, but sutra study. That will be on Wednesdays live, but you can always catch it on a replay. And that is part of my 300-hour YTT as well. So if you sign up for From Sutras to Self, which is $40 for 2 CEUs, you get $40 off of the bigger one. So it's kind of your like loss leader to have a taste. The next free call in here is at the end of June, and it's called Teaching Multi-Level Classes with the SERVE method. The SERVE method is my framework for including almost everyone in class, is that we structure our classes with sound exercise physiological principles. We experience them ourselves as a student. We repeat those classes over time with only minor variations. And then when we do vary, that's the V, we vary with intention. And then the E means when you do these and you self-assess, you will evolve as a teacher, kind of on the fast track. So I'm going to unpack that method for you and talk about including almost everyone in class on that next call.